Hello and welcome to our December update. Today I want to walk you through some of the great improvements we've made this month to our activities. This month's a little different in that we're not releasing a new update to UiPath Studio or Studio X, but we are releasing some activity updates that you can upgrade and take advantage of. I'm going to start by walking through improvements in our business Excel activities, which is the default activity set in Studio X, but it's also possible to work with them in Studio, and I'll show you how to do that at the very end. Alright, let's get started. As a starting point, I want to talk about a pain point that we've fixed this release, and that is that many times what you see in Excel, depending on your regional formattings, is not what's returned by Excel to the UiPath robot when we run. For example, let's look here. My regional settings have me seeing day, month, year. Makes sense. This is, for example, September 1st, 2020. But when I run it, and you can see down here, I'm going to use this value in a message box here in Studio X, it's going to return it to me in the English US format. And this is a behavior of Excel at automation time. So even though this is what I see, 01/09/2020, what Excel is returning to the robot is 9/1/2020, which is a little frustrating for me as a user. So to help with this, we've now introduced this concept of read formatting. And so you can choose how you want to get the value back from Excel. Same as project, I'll talk about that in a minute. We've now introduced a project level setting so you can control the default behavior for every Excel file in the project. But I also have default. Default is whatever Excel gives me back, which is going to be the ENUS formatting. I can choose raw value, this would be no formatting applied, or I can choose display value, which is going to tell Excel to give it to me exactly like it appears in Excel. This is going to introduce one little problem, which I'll show here in a second. So not only am I going to get date 1, but I'm going to get date 2. I've simply created named cells here in Excel. So I've named this cell A1 date 1, and I've named B date 2. You can see B has a behavior where I've truncated the column such that Excel draws it as a series of pound symbols rather than actually showing me the date because the column's not wide enough. So now when I run, this should be date 1, date 2, and I can see that the message box is showing me exactly what I see in Excel, which is great for the values in the A column because I'm seeing exactly as it appears, but it's not so great in B because I'm seeing exactly how it appears and I want the real value. So to help with this, we've also introduced an autofit activity. So autofit is going to automatically resize all the columns in the range I indicate. I'll simply indicate sheet 1, and so it's going to expand them to fit all of the content so that nothing's being truncated. Great. And so now everything's working exactly like I expected. Okay, let's pick up. I'll talk about project settings at the very end. Next thing I want to talk about that has been a popular request is we have introduced the ability to now create and move charts around between the various Word documents, between various Microsoft Office documents. So I'm going to pick this sales opportunities file here, and what I have is it has some data over here and it has a summary table, and what I want to do is I want to insert a chart that's going to show me the percentages of in terms of my sales, what percentage of sales are in each stage in the pipeline. So to do this, I'm going to use this new insert Excel chart activity right here. It's going to ask me what chart category I want. So for the purpose of this, let's go with a pie chart, and let's choose to go with a standard pie. What data range do I want? Let's go ahead and just indicate here in Excel. Click confirm, and I'm going to insert this into my summary sheet as well. Now, I want to point out the properties panel. If you haven't spent any time with the properties panel, we try to avoid the need for it in Studio X, but there's some interesting functionality here, especially for working with charts. So one of the things I can do is I can control the chart size. So I have a height, I have a width down here, and I can also control the left and the top. And so this is saying how far from the top left corner of the sheet do I want it to appear. And the value here is in Excel units, but it corresponds approximately to pixels. And so my chart top 20 is probably fine if I put it far enough to the left. And so 60 is not going to be far enough. I'm sure that's going to draw over the middle of the table right here. Let's go back to Studio X and let's try changing this to about 200 and see how it works. The other thing I can do is when the chart's inserted, I want to save this so I can use it later to work with it in other document types. For example, if I want to put it into PowerPoint or Word, so let's just say inserted chart and click OK. All right, let's run this and let's see if this is going to do what I want it to do. And I can see that the chart indeed appears here in Excel. And as you would expect, we have all the categories or main categories that Excel offers, as well as once you pick a particular category, you can then choose a specific type in that particular category. Let's go back to Pi. Let's go back to Pi. Everything's still good. Let's go ahead and delete the chart because we don't need to create 2 copies of this. All right, so next thing I want to show is once I've created the chart, if I want to put it into a Word document or PowerPoint, how would I go about doing that? Well, so let's start by putting it into PowerPoint, as this has been a very common request. So go ahead and pick a PowerPoint file. I have a presentation here as a placeholder. All right, so in order to move the chart between Excel and PowerPoint, we're going to use the clipboard because Office provides a lot of great support for working with charts on clipboards. So let's choose Copy Chart to Clipboard. It's going to ask me what chart I want to do. I could browse any of the charts in the file because there are no charts. Remember, I deleted it. Let's go ahead and use our save value, and let's just use the chart that we created right there. All right, now here I want to use it's called Paste Item into Slide. Because it's on the clipboard, we don't explicitly know that it's going to be a chart, and PowerPoint at the moment doesn't offer a lot of great options around configuring those charts. So we're just going to kind of assume here, but what do I want? Presentation, what slide number? At the moment there's only 1 slide in there, so that's great. And then the content placeholder that I want to paste it into is going to be, we'll just put it into not the title, but the content. I again want to point out the properties panel over here. I have the ability to choose properties including the height, the width, and just like I did in Excel, the left and the top of where this is going to appear. For now, let's just let it be inserted as it normally would. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put this into a Word file as well. So I have an empty Word file in my project folder as well. And in this one, because Word offers us some additional options around charts, it's actually going to be an explicit paste chart into document. It's going to ask me where I want to paste it. Let's put it at the end. And it's going to ask me how I want to paste it. And I can choose whether I want to paste it as a picture, whether I want to link data, or whether I want to embed the workbook. For the purpose of this, let's go ahead and embed the workbook. And with that, let's click Run. And if everything goes according to plan, I'll see the chart inserted. I should see it inserted into PowerPoint, and I should see it inserted into Word. All right, that's done. If I go back here to Data Manager, I'll click Open. My PowerPoint will open. You can see that the chart was inserted. We could have set the height and width properties if we didn't want it full like this. And then the same thing is true for Word. I will see that the chart has been inserted into my Word document just like I would expect. All right, going back to Studio X, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about some of the other property improvements that we've made. The final thing I want to talk about in the designer before I get to the project settings is in Studio X, we have also now enabled you to open and work with Excel files, Word files, and PowerPoint files that are stored in SharePoint. So if I say use Excel file here, and if instead of opening this local file that's here, I want to open a copy from SharePoint, all right, I can see it's here. Say info, I want to copy path, And when I go back to Studio X, I can say text. I can paste that URL in there. Now what the warning is going to tell me, it's going to tell me that create if not exists is not currently supported when working with URLs. So we have the ability to open existing files on SharePoint, but Excel is not going to be able to create a new file that does not exist for us. But that's okay. Now, what if I want to work with the contents of this file? So this should be the same as the file I had opened a little bit ago with the dates in it. So let's say I just want to, for each row in there, and I want to choose the range and I want to browse. So normally we're not able to work with remote files for our preview experience, and I would need to create a template file up here. Additionally, we haven't been able to work with file types that were not XLSX. So now is the time to go over to our project settings and talk about some of the improvements that we've made here. You'll see a new category here called Excel Business. When I choose Excel Business, you'll see a few options. First is Launch Excel. I'm not demoing this today, but we have two values now, Automation and Application Mode. Certain Excel add-ins do not load. Excel chooses not to load them normally when it's started by an automation, such as UiPath. However, now with Application Mode, this will start Excel in a way that will load all of the add-ins that are present. Now let's go ahead and leave it for automation mode at the moment. We don't need that at the moment. Excel visibility. If you don't want Excel appearing when you run your automation, you now have the ability to set that to false. Let's go ahead and set that to false just to show that that's going to work like we would expect. I want to note here at the moment Studio X does not offer debugging, so only the run values need to be set. The debug values, something we're looking at in the future, which is why we have not removed them. But at the moment, only run values matter. All right, use Excel file. I mentioned we had the ability for the read formatting. You can set it to default, raw value, or display value, and then any use Excel files that are set to use same as project will inherit whatever is set here. And the final option I want to show is now for the Excel preview, we have the ability, instead of letting Studio X parse the file contents themselves, which bring the limitation around XLSX files only, not working with files on SharePoint, things like that, we can say I want to use the Excel instance. And when I click OK, this is now going to start Excel in the background to read the file contents as opposed to Studio X trying to parse it itself. And you can see even though I'm loading this from SharePoint, I can now see the sheets that I have present in here. And at runtime, if I were to run this, now this is actually not going to do anything particularly interesting, so let's go with message box just to show that it's going to do what we expect. Again, Excel is going to start up. This is going to be a little bit slow in this current preview when loading a file from SharePoint. But let's go ahead and pick date 1. And let's go ahead and just use our display value as well, just to make sure that they're the same. Let's click run. And you'll see that even though we're working with a file on SharePoint, as indicated by a URL, now with our December preview, we are able to process that Excel file at runtime, and we are able to preview the contents of it by changing the Excel preview setting in project settings. The same functionality works for using the URL for both PowerPoint and Word, although in this preview, PowerPoint will not show you the design time preview of the file contents under the plus sign. You'll still get the message about it only works for local. The last thing I wanted to show is if you are a Studio user, not a Studio X user, how can you try the new Excel functionality in the business Excel activities? For example, to leverage the chart support that we've added. PowerPoint and Word activities are the same between Studio and Studio X, so there's no difference there. But in order to see the Excel activities, you need to turn on the Show Studio X filter. Down here you'll see the Studio X and then Business category, and you can find all of the Studio X activities, including the new Excel ones. So for example, if we type chart support, we'll see here we have the Insert Excel Chart and the Copy Chart to Clipboard. One thing to note though is the Studio X Excel activities or the business Excel activities are not interchangeable with the ones that are available by default in Studio. That means that if you want to work with the chart, you'll need to use them inside of the use Excel file. They will not work inside of the Excel application scope that's present by default in Studio.